Welcome everyone to today's webinar around eliminating blind spots by monitoring Citrix Cloud and Cloud Connectors. By ways of introductions, my name is Stacy Leidwinger and I'm with the marketing and product marketing team here at Goliath. And with me you have our technical consultant, Avi Litt. So as we wait for a few people to still log on, I did want to go through some basic housekeeping and set expectations for today's agenda. So we're going to talk a little bit about what are the challenges that we are hearing from IT pros like yourselves. We've been talking with Citrix CTPs and other experts and really highlight what are some of the challenges around Citrix Cloud and those cloud connectors. What are the needs that we're hearing for people to overcome? And then we'll actually demonstrate in a user example of how we're helping clients overcome those challenges. If you have any questions throughout the session, please add them to the Q&A box. We definitely will stop and take questions as it goes on. And if any that are at the end, we'll go through them then. One question we always get is, will this recording be available? Absolutely. Within 24 hours, you'll have a copy of this recording in your inbox so you can go back and review or even share with your colleagues if it makes sense. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And I really wanted to kick off today's session just with one slide to really orient you around Goliath Technologies in case you're not familiar with us. So here at Goliath, we offer monitoring and troubleshooting software with embedded intelligence and automation so that we can go ahead and anticipate, troubleshoot, and document performance issues regardless of where your applications, workloads, or users are located. And we're going to talk a bit more about that embedded intelligence and automation, but at the heart of it, we are going to automatically discover your entire Citrix infrastructure, identify what to monitor, how to monitor, and alert you based on industry best practice thresholds. It's because of that capability that if you talk to any one of the organizations that you see a logo here on, they'll tell you that when they work with Goliath, it's as if they've hired 2 to 3 full-time troubleshooting experts that are available 24/7 by 365 days out of the year. What you'll also see is we can scale to some of the largest Citrix deployments, both on-premise as well as in the cloud, as well as having an ease of use and price profile that allows us to meet the needs of small to medium-sized organizations. And my final takeaway, because we do have some health systems here today with us, is we are known as the health IT standard. It's because we have business and technical relationships with all the major EMR, EHR vendors, from Cerner, Epic, Meditech, Allscripts. So not only can we provide you data and visibility across the entire end user experience when working within Citrix, we can do that across all those major EHR, EMR vendors as well. And with that, we have purpose-built modules that give you that visibility. So with that background, let's jump into what we really are here to talk about today, which is Citrix Cloud. So I thought what we could do is really kick off, and it always helps Avi and I to understand where the audience is in terms of your plans to really move and deploy to Citrix Cloud. So Anna, who's in the back end helping us, if you want to go ahead and open up the poll, what we'd like to really understand is, out of those listening in today, are you already on Citrix Cloud? Are you looking to move to Citrix Cloud in the next 12 months? Or currently you have no plans and are just here to kind of get a better understanding and think about it? I will say we hear a lot of people moving more and more to Citrix Cloud, both as the demands with remote workers increase, as I think people look for other cloud technologies that they can leverage. And we know that Citrix Cloud itself, having worked really closely in that environment, have made a lot of progress, a lot of strides that really have allowed organizations to move quickly. So we have about 50% voted. Let's take a few more minutes to go, or seconds here, see if we get any additional votes in. All right, Anna, if you want to close the poll, let's see the results. So it looks like the majority of you here today are really just looking to get more information. So haven't yet built out a project plan around Citrix Cloud, but are looking to understand maybe some of those challenges as well as best practices. The good news is whether you're on Citrix Cloud, looking to go to Citrix Cloud, or just thinking about it, everything we talked to today and a lot of the core capabilities you're going to see work within your on-premise infrastructure as well. So let's move back into the presentation. So as we pull up the slides, some of the biggest challenges that we hear from clients as they move to Citrix Cloud is really the loss of visibility around the health of Citrix Cloud as well as the cloud connectors. And so one of the pain points that we often hear is whether it be cloud or maybe one of the services within the cloud connector go down, there's really no advance notice. In fact, I've talked with clients that say everything can work fine for users that are already in a cloud session, but when new users try to log on, then there's a problem. And so what does that mean? There's sporadic downtime. End users are sometimes being automatically logged off for no good reason. And without visibility into that environment, what many IT pros are struggling with is they don't have data to troubleshoot the issue like they did when it was on premise. So now their first mechanism is, one, they're waiting for the end user to actually make a call and decide, that there is an issue. Then their first reaction is, let me call Citrix and see if there's an issue with Citrix Cloud or any of the cloud connectors. Often in between that, they might check the Citrix availability site and see if there's a major outage or major problem going on, and if there's not. So when we talk to IT pros, while they like the ability to have Citrix managing some of the role servers, that whole control plane layer, licensing, a lot of that headache has been removed, but they've also lost great visibility, which means they can't be as responsive to their end users as they would like. And it's because of these challenges that here at Goliath, and obviously want to jump into the next slide, we've really gone ahead and built a comprehensive solution for Citrix Cloud monitoring. So if you're on Citrix Cloud today, you may recognize that you're still managing many of those components. The VDAs are still on-premise or maybe in the cloud like Azure, but you're responsible for managing those VDAs, both for apps and desktop, Active Directory, the cloud connectors themselves. You also might have Storefront or the NetScaler Gateway still under your environment. And so for that entire infrastructure, we're going ahead and monitoring it. We're alerting you based on industry best practices and thresholds anytime performance metrics are exceeded. We can even self-heal for many of those environments. We're giving you data so that you can isolate and prove root cause for any times there's issues. And we're not only doing that for the cloud infrastructure. What we're doing that is very unique in the market is we're doing that same proactive monitoring, troubleshooting, documenting of issues specific to your cloud connectors. So we have built-in monitoring rules for all the critical cloud services that come with Cloud Connector. And we can automatically alert you if one of those services is down. We can auto-remediate it, so restart the service. That way your end users are never impacted. And this is one of the top issues that we hear with clients is when their users are having failed logons or sporadic outages, they'll call Citrix and Citrix will say, your NetScaler Gateway service needs restarted. Imagine if you could avoid that entire process and auto-heal before anyone's even impacted. We're also giving you visibility so that you can truly identify, is the root cause of the issue at the connector level, the infrastructure, the user behavior if it's a remote worker. And then we're giving you the data so you can document, which means that you can go to Citrix and say, look, I've looked at everything. I believe the issue is around Citrix Cloud. Or maybe it's around the connector. Or you can even go to your end users and say, this is an issue with the way that you're leveraging Citrix at home in your home office. And so what we've done with our new Citrix Cloud Connector module is really give you the visibility and control that you once had on-premise, or if you're like many of our clients never had with the free tools, but you have the convenience of leveraging in Citrix Cloud. And again, I know quite a few of you that joined aren't yet into the cloud, so this same capability really rest assured if you do have that whole control plane on your own environment on-prem, or maybe you're hosting in Azure, we can go ahead and give visibility to those role servers as well. And the reason that we can do this is, I mentioned earlier on, with Goliath, we have embedded intelligence and automation. We have been building in this intelligence and automation over the last 10 years. And so what that means is we know the common failure points for your end users. It typically happens around logon initiation, logon duration, or during the session itself. And so we have pre-built monitors for all events, conditions, and failure points that could occur. And we're going to automatically identify that environment, set up those monitoring rules, and then automatically alert you based on industry best practices from Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, Amazon, anytime thresholds are exceeded. And that's really our core differentiation, is that you do not need to be an expert. You do not need to take hours and hours of building in monitoring roles or identifying what to monitor. It's all there for you. And one of the great things with Goliath is it's also extensible. So if you have other technologies that you're bringing in that you want to monitor, anything that is a Windows service or has a syslog or SNMP trap, we can go ahead and build rules around that. And we can also then execute self-healing or scripts around it as well. So really what we like and what our customers like about our technology is it's all there so that you can immediately get value from it. You do not have to spend a lot of time to set it up. But equally, as you want to bring in new technologies, it's extensible and flexible enough to do so. So let's start to bring this a little more to light with a client use case example. And so we're going to jump in here. We work with a credit union in Texas, and they came to us in that their entire infrastructure had been on-premise, and they moved to Citrix Cloud. And they have about 500 employees, 5 branches. Many of those employees are working from home these days. And what they said is when they moved to Citrix Cloud, they felt like they instantly lost visibility into that end user experience. Reports they had created, custom scripts they created, no longer worked. And so they had 8 Citrix Cloud connectors running. And if a service went down or a connector had an issue, there was no advance notice. So they felt like they were being very reactive, just waiting for an end user complaint. And many of those end users were servicing customers at their branches, and it was negatively impacting overall customer experience. And then the other challenge was this all occurred as everyone started working remotely. And so there was a number of remote workers complaining of performance issues and slow logons, and they had no way to really prove, was the root cause within Citrix Cloud? Was it in a cloud connector? Was it part of the on-prem infrastructure with VDA? Or did it have to do something with that home user's environment, whether it be home Wi-Fi or user behavior? And so they went ahead and deployed Goliath in their environment. Now, if Citrix Cloud or any of those cloud connectors are down, they're automatically alerted. And in fact, those services are restarted so that users are never impacted. They also are using the deep and broad metrics we offer so they can quickly isolate root cause of performance issues. And then they're able to document that root cause and whether drive a conversation with one of their application teams, another vendor like Citrix, their management team, or even the end user. The other thing they came to us, and we're going to show a little bit more about our reporting here later on today, is they really wanted to understand what is our Citrix usage and activity, right? They wanted to know when our employees are working from home, are they really as active as they were in their home or when they were at the branch? Are they being as productive as they could? Do we need all of the Citrix licenses? Are all the applications needed? So they had a lot of questions just overall around Citrix activity that they were able to answer now that they had the data from Goliath. So let's talk about how they deployed and why Goliath has a proactive architecture that really allows you to get ahead of issues. And so what they did is at each of their branch locations, they had 5, this shows 3, they actually had the Goliath application launcher. And so what they did is in that branch location, they had either a VM or a laptop where the Goliath launcher logged in just as an end user would. And so in that environment, they are now connecting to Citrix Cloud. They're going through the cloud connectors, the entire delivery infrastructure, and ensuring that the applications they need launch correctly, as well as Citrix. So let's say Citrix Cloud is down. Let's say one of the applications is not working. Let's say one of the logons is slower than expected. Now the IT pro is immediately alerted that at location B, there's an issue with Citrix Cloud, and they can go look at this. Now, this is not an automation. This is a true simulation as if a user was going to go ahead and log into the application. And again, Once that's ready to go, you don't have to identify what it's testing. We identify all of those elements, IT points, conditions, failure points, so that we can go ahead and alert on them. Avi, do you want to maybe show an example how this proactive nature and deployment works and really can alert an IT pro if Citrix Cloud is not working or an application won't launch?
Absolutely, and I think you did a great job setting it up right there, where if you think about it, it's these, virtual agents, if we will, we'll call them, that are on that laptop workstation or VM at each physical office location. We also have clients that deploy that into the cloud to be able to test for remote workers. And from these different machines, the technology is launching real Citrix sessions, going through the entire logon process the exact same way that an end user would, so that if there were to be an issue with any of the different components that are all going into delivering a satisfactory user experience, you'll be proactively alerted on it to get ahead of it before end users are actually impacted. So you can see the deployment method where, again, onto a laptop, VM, or workstation, each of the different sites. Now I have a quick video here that'll kind of show what's going on in the background of this. So the technology will launch a web browser to the NetScaler storefront sign-in page. It'll accept any security statements. It'll log in with credentials the exact same way that an end user would, confirm authentication, navigate across the storefront page, search for the specified resources that the technology is supposed to be looking for, find them, click on them, confirm a successful presentation of the resource. And the technology can do this, 24/7. It can do it at, specified times during the day, confirming that all the resources are available. If there were to be a failed launch at any point in time, you then receive a real-time alert on this, again, to get ahead of these issues before end users are impacted. Now, in the case that there were to be a failed launch, you receive that notification. Right within the technology is the Application Availability Analysis tab. And this is the portion of the technology where you're able to get insight into all of those different launches that are taking place across the environment. The top portion of the page, the blue bars are represented by the average launch time of each of these respective launches. And then the yellow trend line shows the overall availability at any point in time. You can filter this based off of date ranges, off the actual location where these launches are taking place from. So Common Spirits, for example, is a client of ours where they have this technology deployed to over 60 different hospital sites across the country. So you'd see all 60 different hospitals right in here. And then the specific resource that you're testing. So whether it's a business critical application or, say, in healthcare, if you're launching, your EHR application, you'll be able to see those right here. Then at the bottom of the page, you're able to see those same details, date and time, the specific resource, the location where the launch was taking place from, and ultimately whether the launch was successful or if it failed. And if it did fail, where within the logon process did it fail? You can then drill down even further. By clicking onto this magnifying glass, we're going to give you step-by-step details of each step of the launch, including screenshots of exactly what would have presented itself to the end users. So what this is helpful with, where this is helpful is, one, it gets you out of the practice of having to ask an end user to replicate the issue, because you have that objective evidence right here. And failed logons have historically been a tough thing to troubleshoot, because if a session hasn't been initiated, you don't really have that much visibility into why it failed. But because we have the logs of each of these launches, you can then take a look back at it historically to understand what the failure was and what the cause was. Now, say a typical use case, if you have a maintenance window overnight, you're doing some updates to a particular application that leads it to not be published. This would then fail at the enumeration stage because there wasn't that resource to be selected and able to be launched. And this is very easy to configure. There's entire scheduling utility where you're just entering, a couple bits of information. There's no scripting that's required, and it's all UI based. And again, these launches can take place, 24/7, or if you just want to have them launch at, say, 6 in the morning before end users get in for the day. Now, that is all for. Sorry, go ahead, Stacey.
I was just going to say one other thing with the screenshot evidence, right? When you've lost some of that control because you are now having some of the pieces of the launch process now managed through Citrix Cloud, what is great is you can go in here, and if you have a failure, it allows you to quickly rule in or rule out. Is it something with Citrix Cloud or the connectors, Or is it something that's going on, like Avi mentioned, maybe an application didn't render during an upgrade process, but you have that evidence. So if you need to talk to Citrix, you have all of the logs, all of the details right here. And it also ensures that you're focusing your efforts, right? So whether it be Citrix Cloud or if you have other cloud environments, right, we can go ahead and launch this and test for applications as well as the entire Citrix infrastructure. Sorry, Avi, I just wanted to point that out because that screenshot evidence when you're trying to bring in a third-party vendor to troubleshoot can be incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. And so we just kind of covered how to be able to resolve, how the technology can be used to solve failed logons. Now, say if there was a long logon, there's, it's taking, users are saying it's taking me, 2-3 minutes to be able to get into my desktop or into my applications. Right within the same console, you're going to be able to pull up all of the Citrix sessions in your environment, both your active and your historical ones. And so when you think about it, upon deployment, we're automatically looking for hundreds of events, conditions, failure points, and thresholds that can impact user experience. And say if there were to be a long logon time, you can be proactively alerted on that. Is that a trend, or is it maybe just one user who's then putting in a support ticket saying that they had a long logon? And what we're looking at is the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop session display. And again, this populates with all the Citrix sessions in your environment, active and historically. We don't average or roll up any of our data. So you're going to get the same level of granular detail for a session that took place a month and a half ago as you would for an active session. So that when, say, an end user were to say, hey, I've been having long logon times for the past 2 weeks, you can just search for that user. This will automatically filter for just that user's sessions. And now you can start your analysis. In this particular case, we're saying that the user had a long logon time. You have a dedicated logon tab that you can always sort. Say, once you find the user session that you want to investigate as to what could have been the bottleneck for a long logon, you just click on the user, and what will populate is a screen that has all the high-level key data points that went into this user session, from the client endpoint machine, the Citrix receiver version, the delivery group. You have a mini topology view here where you can see all the components that contributed to this user Citrix session. So the client endpoint, how they connected into the environment. Was this an internal connection? Was it an external connection? The delivery controller that brokered the session, AD, the session host, and the hypervisor host, all in just one view. You have a high-level logon summary breakdown, as well as key performance metrics. So in this case, we're talking about a long logon time. Sure, you have some information here, but you also have these series of dedicated tabs across the top for logon duration issues. Then you have ICA and HDX connection metrics to be able to give you insight into, the ICA channel and user behavior. Then you move into the data center where you have the session host metrics, the hypervisor host metrics, the processes, as well as the alerts and the event logs. Now, whenever there's a long logon issue, where I go is the dedicated logon tab. And for a lot of the technologies that are out there, you'll get 6 to 8 different stages of the logon process. We're going to give you over 33 different stages. And the page is broken down into 2 different sections. At the top, you have the brokering stages where you can see what's happening at the delivery controller up here at the top left. So, is it drive mapping or logon script execution or profile load that was the bottleneck? Each stage with the duration as well as a Gantt chart to be able to quickly draw your attention to where you need to look. At the top right, you have the stages at Citrix Receiver, the workspace app. And this is without deploying any technology to the endpoint machines themselves, where you're able to get insight into, how long did the ICA file download take, session creation. And then at the bottom of the page, you're able to see the login stage details from the session host. So client and server validation. For authentication, you can drill that open to see which OUs that user was a part of, the domain controller that authenticated the user. Say, we've had times where this would be, 4 or 5 seconds, and if, the client was able to figure out, oh, it's a domain controller at a different physical data center that was authenticating the user logging into another one. It's a quick fix, cut down the logon time by 4 or 5 seconds. The LDAP calls, and then for group policies. We're going to show you each group policy down to the policy name and how long each one took to execute. Now, this is in our lab environment. I have a screenshot here that shows the, I think it represents the value that this provides to our clients a little bit more clearly. So let me just pull that up and show you how that, how our clients use this information.
And maybe, Avi, as you pull it up, right? We hear this quite frequently now with remote workers, that there's a lot of GPO issues, right? As people have now left the office, there's printers that are being decommissioned, there's shared drives. And so as that cleanup's happening, they're forgetting that there's elements of this in GPOs, and it's causing the sessions or the logons to hang and to actually slow down performance. So while this has always been an issue, we've had clients come back to us and say, you know, what has taken them days to identify GPO as a root issue, with Goliath now takes them less than 10 seconds really to drill in and figure it out.
You're exactly right, Stacey. And it's, you know, the level of granular detail is what our clients tell us is incredibly valuable here. Because say, for example, again, you get a notification about long logon time. You immediately see that profile load was consuming most of the time. Take a look down at group policy, see that was taking 190 seconds, and then drill that down into a specific drive mapping policy that took, you know, over 180 seconds. You know immediately where you need to look. In this case, the drive mapping policy was incorrectly mapped. So that was the root cause. We've had clients that have been able to cut down on their logon times by over 80% because of this level of detail within the technology. Now that's just for troubleshooting a long logon. Sometimes the issues, you know, say if it's an in-session performance issue, there's so many variables that go into in-session performance issues, such as, you know, how was the, you know, actual server performing? How was the, you know, the connection speed at that end user's location impacting the session? And then there's one that's oftentimes a bottleneck that isn't, you know, easy to understand, is end user behavior. We all know that end users don't abide by Citrix best practices on what they should or shouldn't be doing within their session. And until you have a level of visibility into what that user was doing, sometimes you may not have the full picture. And so what I'm focusing on this is this bottom left-hand chart for the Ica channel usage. The way how Citrix is architected is that there are virtual channels that handle different functionalities depending on what the end user is doing. So for example, at the top, you can see these end user experience metrics where there's all these different virtual channels within the Ica protocol that, again, handle these different functions. So audio bandwidth, was this user streaming audio? Clipboard bandwidth, was it a large copy and paste job that hung up the session? Thin wire bandwidth, the Citrix display adapter, was that user doing something graphically intensive within their session that could have been slowing down performance? You'll notice that all of these are inbound and outbound, and that is from the server perspective. So audio bandwidth in, was that user talking into the session during a Teams call? Audio bandwidth out, was that user streaming Spotify while they were working? And again, the way how this is utilized is based off the type of bandwidth that is being utilized within the session. You can get insight into end user behavior. So what we can see in this particular case, that there was a spike in thin wire bandwidth, which again is the Citrix display adapter often utilized for, you know, videos, where at the same time when round trip time was spiking, not only did the user have a spike in thin wire bandwidth, but they also had a drop in connection speed. So it's no wonder that with a drop of the connection speed at that end user's location, as well as utilizing a potentially, you know, watching a video or something graphically intensive, that round trip time was going to spike. And until you have this level of visibility and the granular detail, sometimes it can be very difficult to pinpoint root cause. Now, while there's a lot of metrics on here that some of you may not be familiar with, such as, you know, the thin wire bandwidth, within all the different sections of the technology, we're going to provide different areas to help out with what this information means. So for example, back on this screen, if you don't know what a particular metric means, you can just hover over it, where it'll give insight into that particular metric. And we also have direct links to our knowledge base and support center, where at the top right, I'm hovering over this question mark icon. You click on it, and it will take you to whichever support center knowledge base page that you are on for that particular portion of the technology. So I was on the ICA and HDX tab. I clicked on it, takes me right to that page, where it's then going to talk to me about the different metrics that are being displayed, what they mean, and most importantly, how do you actually use them to troubleshoot? Those are just a couple different areas of the technology that I wanted to point out today. So with that, Stacey, let me pull back up the PowerPoint slide and pass it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Avi. And really, these metrics, right, when we talk with our clients, they're like, we know they're there, but it's really hard to see them and grab them if we're using some of the free tools available. So I'll use an example. I was talking to a health IT organization, and they said that they had a clinician that continually called in about really slow performance. And while they could see that some things were going on prior to Goliath, they really weren't sure. When they asked the user, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just working in my EHR application. That's it. And it's so slow. So then once they put Goliath in, they were actually able to identify that, yes, ThinWire was high because he was using some graphically intense. I think it was looking at different x-rays and scans. But they also saw a spike in audio out. And they said, are you sure you're not doing anything else? He goes, well, it's so slow that I listen into YouTube and do some of my trainings as well at the same time. And so, if you keep asking a user, they often don't even realize that the behaviors they're taking could be impacting performance. So whether it is audio, video, or a third-party device, this is something, especially as workers are outside of the office, really allows you to identify, is it anything in the infrastructure or is it simply user behavior? And that is extremely hard to prove without the data. And that's what we hear time and time again with IT pros is they have to prove everything else is working before they typically can then say, all right, user, it has to be something that you're doing. Please, please tell us every little thing that you're clicking on. And so with that, let's talk about the documentation piece of all of this, right? It's not only can you isolate, but can you document and prove it? And I was talking to an MSP the other day, and what they said was so much of our conversation used to be all perception-based. They would perceive something was going on, so it had to be our fault. Now we are having conversations rooted in reality, and conversations that would sometimes go on days are now done in 20, 30 minutes. And we hear that time and time again with our clients. And so what we're able to do is really document that end-to-end user experience and provide you data that you can easily share, whether it be through exports and CSV, PDF, Excel format, whether you want to email or print. We can integrate it into third-party systems, whether it's a ticketing system like ServiceNow. Maybe you don't use email. Maybe you're all on the Slack channels and you wanted to go ahead and have alerts appear there. Or maybe you want in your event management system like a Splunk. And then we offer out-of-the-box reports so that you can enhance this data and you can configure the dashboards. You can visualize it in third-party tools like Power BI and Tableau. So now that you have the data, you can drive very collaborative conversations, not only internally, but as you move to Citrix Cloud with Citrix support themselves, right? So you don't have to feel 100% blind and just relying on them for feedback. This allows you to go to them and determine, are they meeting their SLAs? It goes beyond in another level of deepness rather than just checking is cloud up or down using their website. So let's go to the next slide, Avi. There's a wealth of data then that comes just out of the box with Goliath, as I've mentioned. We can give you end user performance data, whether it be around logon duration, latency, connection speed. We can talk about end user activity. So we can determine how active are your users in a session. We hear many IT pros talk about where management is asking them for reports to really determine, are our employees working from home? We also see they want to understand usage. When's peak usage? Which applications are being used? What about licensing? Now that everyone's working remotely, I talked to a lot of organizations and their first instinct was, everyone needs Citrix, everyone needs access to all applications. We can't have any stop in usage or support for our clients. We need to make sure that everyone is supported at home as they were in the office. Well, that often increased a spike in licensing. Now that we know that people may never come back to the office, there might always be this hybrid way of working. They're going, well, what are people really using? And do we need all of these licenses? And how are people working? We've had HR ask for this data so that they can really analyze and study how has work hours changed? Are people getting on earlier in the day or later in the day to work because maybe they have children at home that are doing remote learning? And then we have all the system performance metrics. So you can determine uptime and availability, memory utilization, host performance, capacity, storage. Many of our clients have used these performance data to justify why they might need to upgrade an infrastructure element. I was working with a company in the UK and they had some old Zen servers. And while on paper it said they should last another 2 years, they were able to prove that anytime any user hit that old Zen server, their performance was negatively impacted. And that was the cost justification to upgrade earlier. And so if we go in, I can just show you a couple samples of some of these reports. This is what we call our end user productivity report. So here you can see each user session, when they've logged in, how long they've logged in for. You can see actual percentage of time that they were active. You can also see max inactivity, which means that we're all inactive at some point. We're on calls, we're in meetings. We just might not be moving our mouse or typing on a keyboard. But if someone's inactive for, let's say, 3 hours, good chance they logged in and walked away from the day. And here with the Zen app, you can see applications used as well. The next report is our end user experience report. And this one's a great one to really understand what is the actual experience at home? What is the log on? What is their ICA latency? Sadly, we've heard stories where users have said, I'm sorry, I missed that report. I couldn't get my work done today. Every time I logged into Citrix, it was down, it was slow. I just couldn't get my work done. Well, now you actually have factual evidence. Was there really a problem, or was that just an excuse that they were looking and blaming on, knowing that there are these remote challenges? So these can be used for trending. These can be used to determine if you're meeting SLAs. I'd say it's one of our most heavily used reports. And then the last one is just an example of kind of a very specific license usage, right? So really to understand how many licenses are being used, when the peak license is being used. We have users that are looking at this really to control concurrent licensing, for example. And if we go through the next slide, I mentioned we have integration with Power Bi Tableau. So we have customers that have really visualized this information. So very similar data, just being shown in a more graphical way. So for example, this is Citrix license usage metrics. So you can see again, how many of the licenses are being used, when are they being used, what time of day are they being used. We have similar graphical ones. Obviously, if you click to the next one, that will show session logons. And you can actually graph it not over logon time, but you can also see what applications they were being used. You can see which portion of the logon process is taking the most amount of time. And you can trend this over 3 months, 6 months, even a year, because we're keeping all of that historical data. We're not rolling it up as Avi shared before. And then I think we have one more example. This is just a Zen desktop to kind of show you how many VDI sessions are available. So as I said, we're sharing a variety of them to give you a sample, but many of these are available both in a Zen app or a Zen desktop environment. Avi, do you want to show everyone how easy it is to go ahead and set up and run these reports? So as Avi brings this up, a lot of this is grounded back into our embedded intelligence and automation. We've worked with our clients over the years. We spend a lot of time talking and gathering feedback around what is the type of data you want? How do you want to use that data? And so it's all pre-built in. So we often get questions around, well, I need a report around logon times and experience for my remote workers. How long is it going to take for me to get results? You can get results the same day that you deploy Goliath because all of this is pre-built into the solution. Avi, you want to show how you would go ahead and create a report?
Yeah, certainly. And so right from the report tab, you just come right here. This is where all the reports that you have running in the environment are going to live. And I'll first start off by just showing how to be able to create a new one. So hit new report. Here's, you'd first just select what type of report that you are interested in. So say, Citrix virtual apps and desktops, and we'll go with the published apps and desktop report, and specifically the end user productivity report. You click on that, hit next. Here, you can decide how you want to sort the column by. So whether it's, per user in alphabetical order, say if you want to have it based off of interaction percentage, you can have it sorted that way. You can always have the reverse sort. So say if you want to have the least amount of interaction at the top or vice versa. You can decide specific users that you want to include or exclude in each respective report, different ways to display the time duration, and then the different columns that you want included in that report. Next, you choose the portions of the environment that you want to include. So whether it's just for a particular delivery group or if you want to run the report on the entire environment. Just do that. And then naming the report, say if, in healthcare, if it's, if you're running it for some of the clinicians. And then type a quick description. You can assign report owners. So whether that you want to have just this report fall under your name, or for anyone within the technology, you can easily be able to specify that. how you want to share it. So whether it's, via email, so PDF, CSV, or if you want to just export it, you're able to do that as well. And then as far as being able to schedule when you want these reports run. So you can run any of these reports on demand, daily, weekly, monthly, so that it's getting to the right people at the right time. So say if you want to be able to run an on-demand report, very easy to select that. Say if you want to have a daily report where you're running this each day, have this start at say 6 in the morning, so that that's when you then be receiving the report. The time period, so do you want it to just be for the past day? You're able to select that, hit done. It's as simple as that. Now, when you run the report, you can then just be able to come here, on the left-hand side, you're able to see the report name, okay, the description, the type of report that it is, who's the owner, the schedule for this. So is it every day, or is it every week, the last time the report was run, and then the next time it's going to run. To be able to actually view the report, you just click on it right there. That'll populate. You also do have the ability to quickly be able to view all the times that specific report has been run. So say again, as you're trying to take a look at a historical report, it's easy to be able to just pull up all those different reports. And then as an additional feature on the right hand side, so say if you have a report that's scheduled to run once a week, but you want it to be run right now, you can then just click run now. You're able to export it right from here, delete it, print out the report if you wanted, and then here you can view all the different types of reports, again, that have been run for each respective report. So that's how easy it is, incredibly intuitive, and easy to get these reports sent out to you. And with that, Stacy, I will pass it back to you.
Well, great, Avi. We're starting to wrap up, and we do have a few questions that have come in. But as we start to wrap up here, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box because we're about to get to them. And so what I wanted to kind of wrap up based on everything you saw in terms of how we can enable you, the IT pro, to really monitor and troubleshoot not only Citrix Cloud, but those cloud connectors, is often the question we get is, how hard is it to deploy and truly get up and running? So I wanted to highlight here our steps to value. We can get you up and running and functioning really in less than 2 hours. And that's because of our ability to auto-discover your environment. It's less than 3 questions that you answer to connect into Citrix Cloud. We auto-deploy. We set up those alerts around the connectors itself. We're going to automatically start collecting and monitoring that data so you can start seeing the sessions populate that Avi showed. The data that would come from the reports will be there. And then keep in mind, because of that embedded intelligence and automation, we truly do serve as a full-time troubleshooting expert on your staff that is always available. We're identifying issues, we're remediating and fixing those that we can, or we're alerting so that you can address them before end users are even impacted. And I think that's really the value that our clients find, especially as they move to Citrix Cloud and lose some of the visibility around the performance of cloud and the cloud connectors. So with that, I will say if you're interested in a demo or a free trial of the software, don't hesitate to email techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com, and we can really assist you with any technical questions or get you set up with a free trial. So with that, Avi, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. The first one comes from Ari. I want to know if Citrix is meeting their SLAs. Can I see a report of the alerts that have been triggered on a weekly or monthly basis for monitoring Citrix Cloud? So yes, any monitoring rule or alert that's kicked off, we can offer a report for that, and you can configure it to run daily, weekly, monthly, however you might want it to run. Avi, anything to add to that?
You hit it spot on.
All right. TJ asks, can you prove if home Wi-Fi is a root cause of slow session performance? We get this quite a lot. Maybe, Avi, if you want to pull up the demo, let me give a use case because we hear this very frequently. We were actually working with an organization, Penn National Insurance, before the pandemic hit, and they had an initiative for remote workers. And they went ahead and deployed Citrix. They were using iGel as their thin client so that they were maximizing hardware. And right as they started to roll out in their test group, some users started complaining that anytime they were trying to use their voice over IP phone, calls were dropping while they were on their Citrix call session. It got so bad and escalated that management was thinking of canceling the entire initiative and project. And so what the IT team did was bring us in to really prove root cause. Now, keep in mind, this was pre-pandemic, but what they were able to notice is that people were making calls fine till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was at 3 o'clock they were seeing a spike in connection speed and bandwidth used. And so they were able to go back to a few of these users and say, well, what happens at 3 o'clock? And they're like, well, my kids come home. Why are you asking? Well, their kids came home and started streaming Netflix. They started playing Xbox. They were getting on their iPads, talking with friends. And there was too much consumption of the bandwidth to really enable both Citrix and voice over IP in that environment. And so in that instance, they were able to prove that it had nothing to do with the new infrastructure. It had everything to do with home office environment. So they were able to get their users upgraded, talk to their users about what their kids were doing when they were home, etc. As you can imagine, this use case has only exploded for our clients with more and more remote workers. So Avi, you want to show how someone can prove home Wi-Fi is the root cause of slow session?
Yeah, we even have a great video on this where you can really prove that within just 3 clicks. So once you've identified the user, you just click on them. Again, we're back to that main screen that has all the components that went into that user session. Take a look at round trip time. Was this user actually having performance issues based off of Citrix best practices? Anytime that round trip time is above, say, like 350 to 400 milliseconds, represented here by this orange line, latencies could be apparent to that end user. And so you can see here that the round trip time was above that threshold, users having performance issues. Network latency, this is real-time network latency from the ICA protocol itself. It's not an ICMP or ping-based test, but it's an accurate representation of how much the overall network is impacting this user's round trip time. You can see that round trip time spiked, network latency spiked. In this particular case, by drilling down to this connection speed metric, which is the amount of bandwidth that is available strictly for Citrix at that user's location, you can see that there is a huge drop from 27 megabits per second all the way down to 4.2 at the same time that spike in network latency occurred, which is a direct indicator that the bottleneck was a drop in connection speed for this end user. It got down to 2.8 megabits per second. You want that to be 10 megabits per second or higher to support a satisfactory Citrix session. So just by looking at these 3 graphs, I can identify user was having an issue, it's caused by the network, and specifically the bandwidth available at that user's location.
Great, thanks, Avi. And we've definitely had clients take pictures of this and again, talk with their end users about what's going on and really trying to identify, right? Maybe they need to be working closer to their router. We hear this a lot. Maybe they need to invest in a Wi-Fi extender, but it really allows them to get resolution fast. Kathy says, have a good day. So thanks, Kathy. Same to you. Hope you enjoyed today's session. We have one from Razi. I'm a service provider and have multiple clients on Citrix Cloud. Can you support my environment? The answer is yes. So we support managed service providers. We work with quite a number of them. So if you're using Citrix Cloud, plus maybe even on-premise, we can assist you there. Maybe worth pointing out, we also have service providers that use that end user productivity report and actually charge for it. So we have service providers that are using our technology so that they can be more proactive and really respond appropriately to their end users, but they can also leverage some of the data we have to really report back around user experience and productivity, and in some cases are charging for that. We have Laurent who's asking, I have multiple cloud connectors. Can you monitor all of them? Yes. In fact, the example you just saw had 8. I think, Avi, you were on a call, you said today someone else had 8 connectors, some have 2, so all of them. Randall asks, can I run your software in the cloud or is it on-prem only? So yes, we are, again, very flexible. We have clients that run our technology on-prem. We have clients that run it in AWS or Azure. In fact, early on, we showed that availability testing. We work with a large US-based airline, and they have their entire infrastructure in AWS. They deployed us in AWS, and they're actually launching their tests across the US and one location in Europe in different data centers to validate that their remote workers can log into their customer service application. And so absolutely, if you want to run this in a private cloud or if you want to run it on-prem, we can do both. All right, we have something from Joyce. We get asked for various reports from our compliance team around end user activity. Do you have any customers that use your reports for auditing purposes? This is a great question, and one that's come up a bit more. So we have a health system actually that uses our end user productivity report to verify they're meeting some of their Citrix policies. So one of their Citrix policies says if someone is inactive after X hours, let's say an hour, they should automatically be logged off. And so we're automatically logging them off for that, or they're automatically logging them off, and then they're using our report to prove to the compliance officer that in fact there are no sessions that are over 1 hour long. So that's one way people are proving policy. It was interesting, we actually hosted a CUGC meeting. Avi and I presented last week, and this came up, and someone was complaining that even with the pandemic, their security team is asking them for more and more information. Sometimes it's as simple as, show me every time Bob logged on for the last month and what time it was and what applications he hit. Did he run any PowerShell scripts? Because Bob's account was hacked and they wanted to see how far that hack had penetrated. And so if you don't have a system like Goliath or a third party, we hear that's extremely difficult to get out of something like Citrix Director. So long answer short, yes, absolutely people use our data to meet security and compliance needs. Avi, any other things there?
No, I think you explained it pretty well.
All right. Follow up to the report is, can I have different reports for remote workers versus those working in the office? Yes, you want to tell them how that works, Avi?
Yeah, sure. I can pull that up. It's as simple as just, one of the metrics that we're collecting within the technology is the, how they connected into the environment. So let me just pull that up because then that's easy to be able to show as far as being able to run it based off of internal versus external connections. Here's just one of those examples of a report where this connected via metric, be the particular NetScaler or storefront server that the user connected into the environment, and so you cannot very easily be able to filter each report to say, okay, I just want the external connections or I just want the internal connections.
Great. Sid wants to know, do we support other cloud environments? Yes, we can go ahead and monitor and alert around some of the performance resource utilization for Azure, AWS, EC2. In fact, we've got some newer products coming out as well if you're using WVD or workspaces. So today, absolutely can handle Azure in EC2. TJ came back. How long is your trial? By default, our trial is for 30 days, but if you need for longer, we definitely have some flexibility around there. Again, it's very easy to set up. We'll go ahead and get you all the prerequisites. You can run it in your environment for 30 days. It's 100% supported. So we always say, use our support team. Validate and test our support just as you would with a client. You have access to the support center. We have a lot of great troubleshooting workflows that really help you identify root cause, as Avi showed. So you get access to all of that. It's 100% supported and it's free if you're interested. Loren came back. Avi, how easy is it to integrate with Citrix Cloud? Do you want to talk to that?
Sure, it's very easy. As far as the information that we need to integrate with Citrix Cloud, it's really just the customer ID, the client ID, and then the secret for your Citrix Cloud account. Once we pull that in, we're able to integrate with the APIs and be able to pull in all the user sessions.
Awesome. Colin asks, how do you price? We really price based on IT elements, right? One thing we like to point out is when you compare everything that you're spending for Citrix and the overall infrastructure, we are a fraction of a cost of that. So we really don't like price to get in the way of that, right? We believe that we're very fairly priced out there, but we're looking at how many IT elements are we truly monitoring and providing you value. TJ came back. How easy is it to deploy? Again, in that slide I mentioned, it's very easy to deploy, right? We're going to auto-discover your environment. We're going to set up all of those elements. Avi, you've set some of these deployments up. I mean, it really takes less than 90 minutes.
Yeah, typically we just, get onto an hour and a half or 2 hour phone call, over, GoToMeeting or, Zoom or WebEx, and run through the installation with you, get it all up, get the sessions coming in, run have the reports set up, and you're all set. So it's a very seamless process.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes people don't believe us until they see it. We had from Sarah, you mentioned modules for healthcare. What metrics do you gather from Epic? Avi, before I bring that up, would you be able to show Epic?
Yeah, let me pull that up real quick.
So as Avi shows our Epic module, as I mentioned, for all healthcare providers, as you see on here, we can pull in data from their EMR, EHR, so Cerner, Epic, Allscripts, Meditech, and we are going to provide you in the same UI where you're troubleshooting Citrix issues, all of the performance metrics. So this allows you to quickly identify when your user says Epic is slow, is it Epic? Is it Citrix? Is it even VMware Horizon if you happen to be a Horizon customer on today's call? And so we can really help you identify that root cause. Avi, you want to talk through some of these performance metrics we're grabbing from Epic?
Yeah, sure. And this is all pulling in from Epic System Pulse. So you'll have the total counts, the average grefs, the average block reads, the web requests, DB requests. As far as the workflow latency, the average workflow time, DB time, client CPU time. So really you're able to see, was there performance issues within the workflow of the Epic application? And our clients, the way how, if you think about it as a Citrix admin who's, working, delivering Epic at, say, Epic Hospital, you may not have access to Epic System Pulse. So by having all this technology, the views of the actual backend Epic application performance, the view of the entire delivery infrastructure, as well as the end user experience metrics, all within a single console, gives our IT pros in healthcare, all the information that they need to be able to identify what the bottleneck could be for performance issues.
Great, thank you. And I think we have one last question, but if someone has more, please submit it. This comes from Dwayne, and one that comes up often. How are you different from Citrix Director and Citrix Analytics? I'll maybe let Avi take that one, and I can add some color commentary. But I would say in almost any client we've worked with, they were using these tools before they turned to Goliath.
Yeah, we have a good slide for this. Let me pull that up. So as far as with Citrix Director, you're going to get anything that's not red really. So you're able to see, was Citrix specifically the issue? But as we all know that there's a number of different variables that impact user experience, and even with delivering Citrix, that isn't just Citrix's responsibility. I mean, you're talking about, the Wi-Fi connection, wherever that user is working from, the network in general. In healthcare, we're talking about the different EHR applications, so Cerner, Epic, Meditech, Allscripts, the back-end systems, the different, peripheral devices, the hypervisor layer. So anything that you see in red, you're not really going to be able to get in Citrix Director, which are all crucial parts of the entire end user experience and being able to troubleshoot issues. So by having them all in a single central console enables our IT users to quickly identify what the root cause is. Not to mention also this information stored historically.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, one of the things that we hear a lot of feedback on, especially when it comes to Citrix Director and Citrix Analytics, is that while Citrix Director will give you some data about the user session, it's not giving you all the information, as Avi points out here. It's certainly not giving you user behavior data. If you're in healthcare, there is none of that visibility at the EHR level. But it's not giving you historical. So I think what Citrix introduced around the same time of Citrix Cloud, or a little after, is Citrix Analytics, which will show you trending data. But the problem is if you start to see log-on times go high in Citrix Analytics, you can't drill in and actually identify who's having the issue and why they're having the issue. So on one hand, you've got a lot of data that's not being correlated or historical, and then you've got a historical view, but there's really nothing that's bringing it together. And that's really the sweet spot, I think, of where Goliath fits in, so that we can give you very discrete information about all the IT elements that impact that end user session, from their endpoints through their logon, their connection, their behavior, all the way through the infrastructure and into the cloud connectors and the Citrix cloud infrastructure. But we can also show that in a historical and trending way, so that you can go ahead and determine, are your performance metrics being hit over time? So with that, we wrapped up all the questions. I really appreciate the activity. I know Avi and I always say these are a lot more enjoyable when we get really good questions as we did today. If you do have additional questions, or you want a trial, or you would like a custom demo, do not hesitate to reach out to techinfo@Goliath Technologies, and we will help you in any way that we can. Again, I hope all of you have a good and safe day. And Avi, thank you as always for joining me today.
Thanks, Stacey. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.